So we're going to look at a practical technique, quote unquote, here that we can use. And it's to do with something called cognitive diffusion. I'll explain what that is, diffusing thoughts. And it is called leaves on a river. Now, I want to set the scene for this by revisiting something about the nature of trances very briefly. We talked earlier on about how trances are these states that emerge from certain conceptual sets, narrow conceptual sets. A state emerges from that, and from that state, from that experience of the trance, emerge certain automated behaviors and responses. So I talked earlier about a trance being any kind of state from which automated behaviors and responses just bubble up. Now, when we think about behaviors normally, we think about obvious things like taking action in the world, moving our arms, speaking, these sorts of things, behaviors. So you might see somebody who's worried and, let's draw a caricature of someone who's worried, and they're there and they're glancing about furtively, not really taking productive action, but just sort of maybe biting their nails, and you hear them speak and they're saying, I don't know about this, whether I should do this or this, and maybe there's a quiver in their voice. I'm just giving a caricature to illustrate the kinds of things we might typically think of as behaviors. But one thing that people don't necessarily consider to be behaviors, but most certainly are thought structures, cognitive activity, thoughts, thinking, what we often call thinking. It's a behavior, it's an internal behavior. So the interesting thing that occurs with a lot of trances, and this is how trances often perpetuate themselves, is there's an unconscious conceptualization from which emerges an experience of the moment, a state, if you like, and from which emerges, amongst other behaviors, the behavior of sort of internal dialogue-based thoughts, classic thoughts. But the thing about this particular class of behavior is it feeds back into the base and therefore perpetuates the trance. If you think about the hypnotic loop model, if you've looked at Hypnosis Beyond the Trance Myth, which is on the Hypnosis Without Trance website, or you've studied the Hypnosis Mastery Program, there's the concept of hypnotic loops there, of how loops perpetuate themselves. And the last step of the loop perpetuating itself is an evaluation that reinforces the original beliefs. This is the cognitive part that we're looking at right now. Trances are self-validating. Hypnotic loops perpetuate themselves, and the step that leads to the perpetuation is often some sort of cognition that has emerged from the trance and feeds back in and reinforces it. Now, what's important to recognize here is that, in a sense, we don't really need to do anything. The technique that I'm about to teach you is a very useful one, but a lot of people would say it's redundant. You don't need it. The only thing that you need is to understand the nature of thought. That when you understand the nature of thought, well, you don't have to let go of it anymore because it lets go of you. Because you see through the illusion. You see that the thoughts you're thinking are not facts, they are simply thoughts. Whatever you say it is, you're wrong. You're not dealing with reality as it is. It's just thoughts emerging from a trance, bubbling up through your brain. I sometimes refer to this rather crudely to some clients as brain farts. There's not necessarily any value to them. They're just things that bubble up, like uncomfortable gas, and create an experience that isn't necessarily pleasant. So if we see thoughts, if we really come to see thoughts for what they are, they're not facts. They are just thoughts. We can no more be disturbed by them than we can be disturbed by a Scooby-Doo cartoon, for example. I mention that as an example because I know my oldest daughter, who's now 11, when she was younger, she used to be terrified of Scooby-Doo. The monsters on it would frighten her and upset her. She would be fearful. But of course, she's not scared of Scooby-Doo anymore because she's come to see Scooby-Doo for what it is, simply a cartoon that's made up for entertainment. She doesn't get taken in by it the same way she used to. She sees it for what it is, so it loses its power to upset. And the same is true for thoughts and thinking, once you see it for what it is, it loses its power to upset, because you're not dealing with reality anymore. You're not dealing with facts anymore. You're dealing with thoughts. So some people say that's all you need, is to come to really see, my goodness me, look, this isn't real. This is just the way my mind's making it up. It's just the way I'm thinking. And when you see that, you fall out of that thinking, back into a much more open state, out of the trance that you were in, into a much more open state of innate peace, innate well-being. And you know what? That's true. You do. If you really see in the moment that what you're experiencing is not things as they are, but just your thoughts, your thinking, your mind-made creations, if you really see that in the moment when it's happening, the illusion pops. But it is the nature of the illusion to seem real. That's what our brain is doing. It's creating vivid, powerful, real illusions to suck us in deliberately. So whilst it is true that when you get that, when you see through it, the death of the illusion occurs and you become free, it's true. But there's all those times we end up not seeing it. So it can be useful to have different ways, different approaches, different means of pointing us in this direction, and also to start to develop a little bit more flexibility with regard to our thoughts and thinking from some other perspectives as well. And this is why I'm going to be sharing the following exercise with you. And just one last thing I'll set up in terms of a pre-frame is we're going to do this here. I'm going to talk you through this. And we are not going to be addressing any particular trance that you have. We are just going to be addressing something about the nature of experience and the nature of thought that will give you some insight and will give you some skills that will become useful in creating a little bit of flexibility between you and your trances and the thoughts that come up. So that you can free yourself and release yourself much more easily and start to develop this as a sort of a bit more of an unconscious reflex. This is a practice of a conscious skill that over time can become more of an unconscious reflex. So I'm going to invite you now to pause this audio if you need to and find yourself somewhere comfortable where you can sit. And I would suggest sitting rather than lying down, where you can sit and ideally sit upright. You want to be comfortable but not too comfortable, because you want to be able to be present and you want to be able to be alert. And you want to be able to be present and alert in a very relaxed, focused way to what it is that comes up for you in your mind. So I'm going to assume that you've done that now. So just find yourself seated where you are. And if you haven't already, just close your eyes. And I'd like to invite you to imagine that you are sitting on the banks of a river. You're sitting on the banks of a river, perhaps a very pleasant day, perhaps a sunny day. And you're sitting there very peacefully, watching the river gently flow by. And as you watch the river gently flow by, you can become aware that from time to time a leaf will float by on the river. Maybe there's a tree upstream just shedding some leaves. So some leaves drop onto the river and they're just going to flow by, just taken along by the gentle flow of the river. And sometimes maybe one leaf at a time will come into view and disappear. And maybe sometimes 2 or 3 leaves will come in and disappear, but the leaves, they just come and they go. They drift in and they drift out. And as you just notice what you notice, as you consider this river, and the flow, and the pleasant day and the leaves floating by. Just allow yourself to become aware that just as leaves come and go, thoughts can come and go. And in this moment, as you know that leaves can come and go, and thoughts can come and go, you can begin to allow yourself to become aware of the thoughts in this moment and these moments, the thoughts that might arise in your mind. Because I'd like to invite you to keep your attention on the river, and as you keep your attention on the river and the river flowing and the leaves coming and the leaves going, should any thought pop up, just take that thought and imagine what it would be like to place it on one of those leaves so it just flows away, disappears. Noticing any thought and every thought. When it comes up, place it on a leaf and let it flow away as your attention remains on the river or returns to the river. Any thoughts that pop up. You may wonder whether you're doing this well. It's a thought. Let the thought be placed on a leaf and disappear. You may wonder why you're doing this. It's a thought. And take the thought, place it on a leaf, and let it disappear. And noticing the flow. You may have thoughts about the sound of my voice. You can place them on the leaf. Let them disappear. And the river just flows. And thoughts and leaves. And this moment. And you can notice just how easy it is for you to place thoughts on leaves and let leaves float out of sight, float out of mind. And you focus on the river comfortably, bringing your attention back to the river. And in these last few moments of this exercise, you can consider deeply, either inside or outside of consciousness, everything that this experience might know that's useful for you now in recognizing how thoughts can come and go and just flow as your attention returns to this moment. And you can be comfortable within yourself, breathing comfortably, and noticing where your attention goes, and bringing your attention back as you're breathing comfortably to the idea of a river that flows and the experience now of a river that flows and leaves that come and go, and that thoughts can come and go, and thoughts can connect to leaves that just drift way out of sight, out of mind, as your attention returns to right now. So you can just take a few moments to know anything that you need to know about this, to gather yourself, to bring yourself back into the space that you're in by opening your eyes if you haven't done so already. Just noticing what you notice as you open your eyes, noticing what you experience within yourself, and recognizing that me talking you through this is a way of introducing you to this. And you will have had the experience that you have had. And that will contain within it the value that it contains for you. And beyond this, I'd like to invite you to recognize that you don't need me talking you through this, or anybody talking you through this, because this is something that you can simply do. And it can be an interesting thing to do for just a few minutes every day, maybe just for a week or so, just to kind of get into the groove of it and see how well you can do this and see how much better you get at doing this. Just spending a few minutes, not 5 minutes, not 10 minutes, just a few minutes doing this every day, noticing the experience of being able to recognize thoughts as they come up, just attaching them to a leaf on a river and letting them go. Now, not only do you not need me to talk you through that, you may well find that you will do it better without the sound of my voice. Because I'm aware, if I was doing some hypnosis with you one-on-one, you as the listener, we would be working together. I would be paying attention to your responses. I'd be matching what I'm saying to what's going on for you. So there could be a degree of mismatch in that, but it's just really there to introduce you to the concept. And what I would like to invite you to do is to simply do this, to practice this a couple of minutes every day, letting thoughts come, letting thoughts go. Now, I'm not suggesting you do anything beyond this yet. I'm not suggesting that you find yourself noticing that if you were to choose to tune into the felt sense of your experience as it goes, start to become aware of the thoughts that emerge from that felt sense, of course, you could then play around with, experiment with, noticing what it's like for those thoughts to just be attached to the leaf and let go, and connecting back into yourself and being present and still in your mind. Just letting the thought go. Now you could do that, but that's not what I'm suggesting at the moment. What I'm suggesting is that you simply explore with this as a skill. Now, there's a principle here which I'm going to invite you to, which is the principle of shrinking the change. If this is something that you are not used to doing, if you're not used to doing any self-practice, regular stuff, some people are big meditators, they meditate for hours a day. For many years I did Nigung meditation daily. I probably do up to half an hour of Nigung meditation a day. Did it for absolutely years. Now, some people think, well, I've got to do a lot, otherwise it's not worth doing. I would say Do as much as you like, but give yourself permission to do 1 minute of this. The thing about practices, any practices, is consistency is more important than intensity or duration. You're better off doing just a tiny bit every day and letting it build what it builds in terms of skills. And let me be clear about this. As you do this, when you do this every day, you are building internal skills. This is a skill set. If you do it for a week, a bit every day, you will get difference from just that. Of course, if you do it for 2 weeks, you get more difference. You do it for 4 weeks, you get more. If you did it for 6 months, you'd really start cooking some skills. I did Nigung meditation, which is an internal meditation on internal body alignments and connections. Did this for absolutely years. But I still have the skills. I don't do it anymore, but I still retain the internal skills from having done that practice. Just seen a kid ride past the window on his bike. You don't forget to ride a bike because you get the skills in the body. So any time spent with this is going to pay some dividends. So it's down to you to choose how much you'd like to do that. But what I would at least recommend at this point is do this for a week, just 1 or 2 minutes a day. Just that. Allow yourself to be present with it. If you get thoughts come up like, oh, this isn't working, put them on the leaf. If you get thoughts coming up going, this is too difficult, put them on the leaf. Thoughts come up, I'm no good at this, put it on the leaf. Just return back to however it is you choose to think about that river. You choose to consider the river. Okay, so that is Leaves on a River, and it's time to let this audio go and move on to the next.